I'm being extremely clever up here, and there's no one to stand around looking impressed. What's the point in having you all? Doctor Who.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Essens. One of the traits that is very difficult to do well is the smug character.
In my opinion, the Doctor is one of the few characters that I've seen that comes off as very smug and arrogant, yet lovable. And that is very difficult to find that balance between being confident and overly confident in themselves and still being a character that people can relate to and like.
When I think of smug characters, the first one that comes to mind is Thadwick Mercer from the He Who Fights with Monsters series. This character is very full of himself. He's very looking down his nose at all of these other characters. Everyone exists to serve me and never takes responsibility for his own actions.
And so very punchable.
Yes, that's like my favorite thing about smug characters is even the reader just wants to deck them if you write them correctly.
If that is your choice to write them that way. Kind of like we've both hinted at, there are different ways that you can write a smug character, and it's all about finding the right balance of characteristics to go along with the smugness in order to determine whether they are the likable, lovable kind of smug or the I just really want to deck you kind of smug. Before we get too far into that, let's get to the synonyms. What smugness is.
If he's the punchable smug character, you're going to use a lot of words like he's puffed up, maybe a teacher's pet, he's very conceited, egotistical, or even pretentious.
If they are the more lovable kind of smug, or it is the character viewing themselves, they're going to use words more like sure and confident, clever, or they could say that they have high standards and they're self-satisfied, they're sure of themselves, they're worthy of better things.
Or even seeing themselves as superior. And I think that is the key in writing this particular character, is they see themselves as superior to everyone else around them. Whatever it is that elevates them, oftentimes it isn't even something of their own merit, which is really why we want to punch them. Well, do you know who my father is? We just wanted to smack that character so hard, and it's great.
It's also important to remember what the opposite of smugness is. This is your humble and demure characters, the ones that don't seek the spotlight, who will go about doing great, amazing things without ever bringing attention to it. There is a sometimes correlation that those humble and demure characters tend to be more naive. So that kind of fits into the antonyms of smugness, but not necessarily.
If you're looking to really make a certain character look smug, place them next to somebody who's incredibly humble and naive, because that'll just highlight the difference between the two, and we'll see that much more how smug this character really is. There is a duality in the root emotion that seems like they're very different, but both ingredients have to exist in order to have this kind of smug character. That is the enormous amounts of pride, that superiority we mentioned, and then an incredible insecurity, which is why you have very immature characters who end up being smug.
This is one of those times where the insecurity is what leads them to being very outspoken and loud about it, because they want people to focus on what they view as their positive attributes and those things that they're good at. So they're going to be very prideful about anything because they actually feel insecure internally. So this tends to come off as a very high energy sort of thing because they're like, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this amazing, exciting thing that I'm doing. But inside, there is a lot of anxiety happening at the same time.
As far as setting up this kind of character, there are a couple of precursors that you want to include. One, of course, is that deep-seated insecurity, but also consider having some kind of a tiny victory in this character's life that then gives them a platform in order to proclaim their own greatness to everyone else. You kind of think of Draco Malfoy. whenever something tiny happens, he gets this smug looking down his nose at the Gryffindors expression. Because, look, I'm right, and ignore all the times when I was wrong. I caught them going to Hagrid's hut at night. And then when he's knocked back down to size, life isn't fair.
Now, if you don't want to have that character that is that infuriating kind of smug, but you want the more Doctor Who lovable kind of smug, then instead of being based on insecurities, those prideful, clever moments can be based on something legitimate. And they're being very outspoken about it and kind of annoying, but you can't really get mad at them because they're right about it, even if they're being kind of rude. So that is another way that you can kind of balance that if you're looking for that smug characteristic.
Another precursor that might happen, regardless of if it's the punchable smug or the lovable smug, is you're going to see traits of complacence. This idea of, I am already at the peak of my game, so there's really no need to even try. I'm better than everyone else. Sherlock and Dr. House both had this, everyone else is inferior, and that's just kind of how it goes. But I don't need to try, especially compared to Anderson.
The purpose of having a smug character really comes into play with how you want other characters to respond and react. So if you do want that Draco Malfoy or that Thadwick kind of character, then it needs to be presented as anger or annoyance, even in their allies. Their allies are not going to be pleased every time this character starts throwing around their weight. In cases where it's the more lovable, the allies are going to be a little bit more sarcastic in their responses, which is a very good representation of this in River and the Doctor's relationship. She is very sarcastic towards him when he starts to get clever.
One of the other things that you're going to have in this character's background and how they present as smug is someone else's name. My father will hear about this from Malfoy. It's not his own authority that he's standing on someone else's.
Or they're leaning on their title. Instead of, do you know who my father is? It's, do you know who I am? I am this great important person, and how dare you step on my toes? Let's take some examples so you can kind of see how to show a smug character in your story. It can be in your protagonists, but we really have to agree with their opinions. We really have to have a reason to like and root for the protagonist who is very smug. Good examples of this include Tony Stark and Sherlock.
Also, pretty much any of James Spader's characters. I think it's his voice, which is gorgeous, but they all have this I'm superior to you and everyone knows it kind of vibe to the character. Of course, we mentioned Thadwick earlier, but his counterpart, the main character in He Who Fights with Monsters, is also incredibly smug. And he just does it as a front to throw people off, but he does it.
And then if you take all of the villain kind of smug characters, the easiest way to show who they are and what they do is how they treat their minions. So you have Draco Malfoy, who is consistently dissing his two bodyguards, consistently calling them idiots and whatever, because, well, they kind of are.
But that's exactly why he has Crabbe and Goyle as his minions, so he can look smart as compared to them, and they'll still kiss the ground he walks on.
Those characters are usually going to be treated like tools rather than friends or people, and they will only exist to that smug character to serve them. And if anybody fails, it's never that smug character's fault, it's the minions' fault.
Yeah, having minions makes for great scapegoats. One of the signature ways to make a character look smug is this half smirk. Seems like those two go hand in hand, at least in my imagination. You're not going to necessarily have a smug character or a smug moment without some kind of smiling to oneself.
Smirks are my favorite. You don't want to overuse the smirk if you have a smug character because you want it to be signature to them. You want it to be signature for that, look at me, I'm so clever, I'm so smart, and you are never going to beat me kind of smile.
And body language is going to be one of the easiest ways to communicate without even any dialogue if a character is smug or not. Some of the things that you'll see is like a swagger in their walk, or how they hold their head is a very proud chin up but eyes down, looking down their nose at people.
They're often going to have their arms crossed or having their shoulders like down and relaxed because there's nothing to worry about. I'm the most clever and smart person around here, so why would I view any of you as a threat?
But again, that biggest thing is going to be that lip curl.
Also remember that these characters have a set of ideas and views that cannot be changed or swayed. It is often the basis of their pride, and no one is going to dissuade them from believing that they are important because such and such a thing.
And it's not necessarily their success that annoys the protagonist or their enemies. It's the fact that the smug character will rub their faces in it afterward.
And in contrast, you need to know, as the author, how that character is going to react when they fail, when they don't get what they wanted or expected. Because it is going to play a lot into the role of whether we like this smug character or not.
As you're designing the character, knowing these things about your character will make them just jump off the page so that I can deck them.
Whether you write the character that we want to punch or the kind of smug character that may be a little bit annoying, but overall they're lovable anyway, make sure that you
write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.